you know what? It's weird because I work in podcast hosting every single day. I always kind of forget how confusing it can be to new podcasters, and I really spent a bit of time this week casting my mind back to when I started podcasting in 2013 with my first show, along with my friend Gary Hale at Two Shots to the Head, and wow, it was a really confusing landscape. So what I want to cover today on the Podcast Accelerator is podcast hosting explained really simply, because a lot of new podcasters are listening to this show. I'm getting emails in, I'm getting tweets, I'm getting various messages on social just saying that, look, I'm a new podcaster listening to this show. So I decided to tackle something that is right at the middle of all podcasting at any point in any journey. Podcast hosting explained simply. I'm your host, Mark Asquith. This, of course, is the Podcast Accelerator. And as you know, this is a product of Rebel Base Media, the podcast tech company that creates Captivate.fm, the world's only growth-oriented podcast host, where you can get 7 days completely for free at Captivate.fm. And of course, this show is brought to you by the team at Aweber as well. As you know, if you are a constant listener to the show, which I know many of you are, I appreciate that. You know that, of course, Aweber helps me with my email marketing. And I know so many of you are choosing Aweber to help you with your email marketing, to build email lists and to build engagement through your podcast. Okay, please consider doing that yourself, because it's absolutely vital to audience growth, okay? Email marketing should be at the center of a lot of the stuff that you do online. Go and check Aweber out, markasquith.com/Aweber. Now, for new podcasters, like I said, there's a heck of a lot to think about, and podcast hosting can be, frankly, it can be really confusing because, you know, if you're not a geek like me, even when I started podcasting, you know, I was a geek. I owned a digital agency. It's the center of geekdom. And it always amazes me that, you know, I forget sometimes, and I think so many other people in podcasting, certainly in the Facebook groups, you know, you see podcasting veterans that sometimes are a little bit, like, they can be a little bit condescending to people. They can be a little bit, I don't know why you're being like that. You know, they can be a little bit just patronizing to new podcasters, and there's no reason for that. I don't see any reason to do that. You know, we're all new at something. That's just like an expert martial artist coming into podcasting and creating a martial arts podcast, knowing nothing about podcasting, and talking condescendingly to that expert podcaster about why they can't do a high kick. Like, it just, you know, you wouldn't see it. You wouldn't ordinarily see it because people understand that. So that side of things baffles me, which is why I want to focus on simplicity. You know, there's never a silly question in podcasting, and it's something that I truly believe. It's something that I'm always there to try and help with, with anything that new podcasters want. So podcast hosting, let's explain it really, really simply. Podcast hosting then it's generally a software platform. So it's usually an online platform that you sign up to. We own one. It's called Captivate.fm. There are others available. Obviously, I'm a little bit biased towards Captivate because it is pretty sweet. But Captivate.fm is one such example of a podcast host. It's online software. And what you do is you sign up for usually a monthly recurring fee. And, you know, the varying different podcast hosting platforms out there have different pricing models to do with this. And, you know, we try to price this very, very fairly. So you sign up for a monthly recurring fee, and it's usually very cheap. It's not expensive at all. No podcast hosting is expensive at all. And what that podcast hosting platform does is it will take your MP3 files, it will give you an interface to create your podcast, to upload your MP3 files, to configure your podcast, to tell Apple and Spotify and Google which categories to put your podcast in. It allows you to put a cover art in there. And of course, like I said, configure your episodes, put your episode titles, your episode descriptions, your show notes, your episode numbers, whether it's a bonus episode, a trailer, put your episode level cover art in there. And like I said, attach an MP3 file to it. And then what a podcast hosting platform like Captivate.fm does is it will generate what we call an RSS feed, which is essentially a container of information that you send to the podcast directories. If you want more information on RSS feeds, there is an episode here on the Podcast Accelerator explaining them. And also on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/rebelbasemedia, there's also a What is RSS video, which is very, very short and very, very easy to understand. There's actually another podcast hosting explained video on there as well, so you can see this a little bit more visually. But that RSS feed then is distributed to Apple, to Google Podcasts, and of course to Spotify and everywhere else that will take podcasts as a form of media. And Captivate and any other podcast host will distribute that for you. You one-time submit to these directories, and then Captivate from here on in, when you publish an episode to Captivate or to your podcast host of choice, it will send that down your RSS feed to the directories. All right. So broadly, that's what a podcast host does. That is why you need one. Some of the other stuff that a podcast host does, a great podcast host, again, like Captivate, will give you download statistics. It will give you analytics that tell you where and how and when your podcast is being downloaded. It will also, again, in the case of Captivate, give you unique listener analytics. And also, it's going to give you a lot more tools to market your podcast. Not all podcast hosts do this, but Captivate in particular does. It will make it easy to generate one-click sponsor kits. It will give you very powerful, very beautiful-looking embeddable players with calls to action in that you can put on Twitter and your website. It will give you a WordPress sync plugin to sync up your WordPress site and auto-publish your podcast over there. So a podcast hosting platform is essentially the middleware. It's the middleware between you, the amazing creator, and the people who can listen via Apple, Spotify, Google, and so on. So, you know, it's software. Think about it like Dropbox or Evernote or Google Drive or Monday.com or any other piece of software that you use, Xero.com. Canva.com. It's just this piece of online software that you need to publish, distribute, market, and track your podcast. Okay, that's what a podcast hosting platform is. Like I said, Captivate.fm is one. There are others available, but of course, you have to make the decision based on what you need, all right? It's all very reasonably priced. Every hosting platform is it's not a heavy cost, but you've got to weigh up what you're getting back for your money, because some are a little bit more value-led than others, all right? So that's what podcast hosting is. If you're brand new to podcasting, do remember to check out a couple of different resources. Number one, this podcast. I appreciate you. Number two, YouTube. YouTube.com/rebelbasemedia, where we post tutorials over there that are very easy to understand. And last but not least, our Rebel Base Media free podcast coaching. We do this every single Friday at 4 p.m. UK, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. Every single week, go and search for Podcast Launch and Growth on Facebook. Join the podcasting group that's very clearly Rebel Base Media, or go to rebelbasemedia.io/free coaching, and I'll be there personally every single week for half an hour giving you free coaching on podcasting, all right? Go and check it out. We do that every single week. Once more, rebelbasemedia.io/free coaching. So until the next time, thank you for joining me. Stay safe, stay well, look after yourselves, enjoy yourself, keep on podcasting, and never forget, the more you expect from yourself, the more you will excel.